2013.
That's it.
Made it through.
What?
To have starting off the day for us, the lovely, soon-to-be Dr. Matthew Segall. Matthew is one of the most amazing examples of an integrated heart and mind that I know, and I always feel very lucky every time I get to hear what's on his heart-mind.
Thanks, Liz.
You're welcome.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good
So,
morning.
here's how we're going to start. In the interest of helping me arrive and get my mind warmed up, I'm not usually a morning person. Just wanted to do maybe just a minute of sitting meditation with you, or standing if you're hard at work, as Mikey usually is, in the kitchen. So just, I'll have a minute of silence, and then I want to introduce us to what I'm going to call the living present. And I know most of you are here to hear about gossip, and I'm going to get there, but I want to contextualize it in, a sort of cosmological and metaphysical understanding of time.
You're gonna tell us some juicy gossip, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, that's the discussion.
Yeah, I'm here.
So, let's just arrive here. It's funny how we can sometimes lose the present, even though it's the ground of all of our experience. Sometimes we get lost in the froth and the spray at the surface, and we forget the calmness of the depths of the present. So let's sink down into that. I'll draw you back into the room at your own pace. So, I first realized the importance of gossip for community building and for soul making, which some of you are familiar with what that idea means. I'll explain it as well as we go along here. I realized the importance of gossip after one of our PCC retreats at Esalen back in 2010. I was driving home in the car with Jamie Sosi and Adam Robert and Becky Farrar, who's not here. And we were just reflecting on how much fun we had and sharing stories about what other people had been doing and the funny things people said. And it just struck me that that gossip, just in a purely descriptive sense, usually the word has negative connotations, but in a purely descriptive sense, gossip has this crucial function of sort of gluing together communities, because when we talk about people who aren't present, we're actually helping to create their personalities. And so that means that we have a lot of responsibility in terms of right speech, right, and engaging this process of sharing one another's stories, especially in the absence of those people. Because when we're in a close-knit community and we talk about someone who's absent, that's going to sort of prime the field among those who are present in that conversation. When that absent person comes back into it, there are all these, you could say they're projections now, but it's what is personality but sort of mirroring and projection, right? So we're always in that messy mixture of the individual's intent and the reflections that they get from others. So we have to be careful when we gossip. but we can't avoid it. And I want to try to contextualize the importance of gossip in community, sort of sociologically for human beings. I want to contextualize it with a certain metaphysical understanding of time. So I think it's easier to grasp the creative power of gossip or speech if we understand how the present moment is this sort of creative power that gives birth to the past, to our own sense of a history as an individual, and to the future, all the trajectories and possibilities that we try to navigate as we move forward. So,
feel free to move that mic if you need to.
So this is my makeshift board over here. So usually when we think of the present moment, we have a rational understanding of it as a sort of instantaneous point, sort of a slice that exists in between the past and the future, with no duration. It's just instant. And then we reflect on this a little bit more, and it seems that, well, really what we have is a series of instants, right? Moving through time in a sort of linear way, and I guess we like to jump between these instants and shoot. Mike is gonna need a new carpet after this.
He's been wanting one for a long
I've been wanting one. Damn you manifestors.
Oh, I know the good place to get one.
So usually, when we try to reflect on time, we get this sense of time as a series of instants, point instants. And I think this is like the common sense notion of time, but I think it's also misleading because it leads us to believe that the present moment is kind of worthless. It doesn't add anything to what's happened in the past or to what might happen in the future. It's just sort of that instant between. And the understanding of time that I want to present is along the lines of the present moment being the source of past and future. So out of each present moment, there is born a certain mode of inheritance of the past and a certain mode of openness or expectation into the future. And the present moment isn't moving through time. The present moment provides time. Okay? So instead of a series of points, we have sort of concentric rings where there's a sort of pulsation and a rhythmic becoming to the present moment where we're constantly contracting the past into this rhythmic, creative becoming, and we're opening to the future. And
It's a light cone, you mean?
it's a light cone, yeah. Except that this isn't just like, physical cause and effect that we inherit from the past. There's also a different kind of causality opening to the future, which we can think of in terms of synchronicity. In the philosophical tradition, going back to Aristotle, it's understood in terms of formal and final causality, so like purposes, the way that in any given instant or any given moment, certain futures are possible for us. And as we engage with the present and the creative power of the present, the possibilities of the future are always shifting. And part of how I think this is relevant to gossip is that in some sense my personality doesn't belong to me, and when other people are talking about me in my absence, my past isn't changing, though it may be reinterpreted, but what's possible for me in the future, all these potentials are shifting and changing. I don't even know it, right? But when people are talking about me, they're changing what's possible for me as a person.
Oh, right.
Nice.
Right?
Yeah.
So when we're engaging time as this living present from which past and future are born, we realize the power of our own speech to tell the story of the present, and to tell the story of others who are absent. And we don't change. Well, I guess we change the past and the future of those who are absent when we talk about them, because we're reinterpreting what happened in the past by telling the story. And with like a game of telephone, the story's constantly kind of evolving. And when we really love people and we talk about them, we can sometimes embellish the story, make it way funnier than it really was. It's funnier and funnier as you tell the story again and again. And that's how you. It's not that the event itself wasn't spectacular, but it's as we tell the story that it becomes the sort of fabric that knits together a community, so that we have this common past that we can refer back to, that allows us to realize all the reasons we want to create a future together. It's like, wow, it was so great, let's keep doing this. So this understanding of time as emerging from the present, I think, provides the context for what I want to say about gossip here. Now,
Can I ask one point of clarification, so
Please.
I'm like totally with you?
Uh-huh.
You said something about time being worthless, like the present
present.
moment being worthless, as a description of how we can take it for granted now. Is that in like we're always looking to the future or something, so we can ignore?
Well, I
the
just
present
mean
moment?
like the common sense understanding of time, where the present is the instant between past and future.
Mhm.
It's sort of, if the present isn't producing past and future in this repetitive, rhythmic like way that I'm describing,
Okay.
then it sort of just sits there, and it's this bare instant, and there's no freedom that you can discover in any moment. Like the freedom and
Like
creativity
it doesn't
that we have.
have agency.
There's no agency, right? It's just a static, given freeze frame, right? And it's only if we have an understanding of the present that allows past and future to sort of bleed into one another, so that there's this tension that's created, that creative freedom is possible. So freedom in terms of how we're going to inherit the past, which isn't changing, but how we inherit it is changing, how we interpret it, how we understand it. And our ability to sort of reach into the future and anticipate things, to make decisions, that requires that in some sense we're already participating in the future, right? So the instant isn't sort of launched between past and future.
It's more generative.
It's generative of past and future.
Thank you.
So that's what I meant by soliloquy.
It gives me chills.
So that's the backdrop, and I'll refer back to this notion of time as we go along. So this word gossip, I mentioned it usually has like negative connotations, and the reason I wanted to focus an entire presentation on it is that in past presentations I've sort of dropped my theory of gossip in a way that maybe was offensive to people, because we've all inevitably been hurt, by gossip. We've all been through high school, and it can be painful, right? So part of what I'm trying to do is redeem both this word and both, the word and the function, the community building function of gossip. And to start to try to do that, we should, understand the history of this word, the etymology of it. Delia's mom, Mia, yesterday, showed us the power of etymology. I think we were listening back. The source of knowledge, two kinds of knowledge to Kant, for those of you who weren't there. Did you explain this to Alex? No? So, anyways, we know the power of etymology, right, to sort of situate the true meaning and power of words. And this word gossip comes from Old English originally, where it referred to sort of godparent or sponsor, and more specifically to the women who would be invited to a new birth. So, they'd be in the room with the mother, there'd be the midwife, and they'd all be talking about this child that's about to come into the world, and they'd be using its name, thinking about all the things it's going to be capable of doing before it's even out of the womb, right? So they're sort of building this personality by gossiping among one another about this unborn life, sort of preparing the ground socially for this being to come into the world. That's what gossip used to refer to. So, it was only, 400 or 300 years ago that it became degraded to just mean like idle chatter or
Which is another
rumor.
degradation of
Like,
femininity
yeah, of
also. 'Cause
femininity,
that's typically
exactly.
the female role
Exactly. Yeah.
in community building.
Right.
More
Yeah, it's another example of that same thing. So, in this context, we can see that gossip, isn't only co-creative in terms of how we help to construct one another's personalities, but it's procreative. So it's we're constantly giving birth to one another's higher selves, or at least we could be, if we engage gossip consciously and responsibly. We can be helping to be each other's midwives and helping to birth one another into our highest potential, by sharing what we've accomplished in the past and telling the stories. We're building the social and the communal foundation for continual birth. Right? We can also use gossip to do the reverse, to hold people back, to tell people that this is who you are, you can't escape all your flaws and so on. In terms of how gossip actually works, descriptively, it could go either way. Now, there are two branches I want to explore here, which is gossip descriptively, as a matter of fact. It just has always been that which glues together and also distinguishes cliques and communities. It's always been a part of how human beings form society, just as a matter of fact. But then there's also, that's the descriptive, there's also a prescriptive branch or element that I want to explore, which is how can we engage gossip more consciously, such that it fosters not only wider and wider circles of community, but deeper and deeper engagements interpersonally within the community. So, first, descriptively, as a kind of gossipology, study of gossip, or theory of gossip, human beings are intensely social, and we're obsessed with one another. So most of our conversation, most of the words uttered around the world in any given moment are social narratives. We're telling stories about one another. Maybe there's like 2 or 3% of like philosophical, rational, theoretical discourse, but most of even that discourse ultimately gets situated within this social milieu of myth, ultimately, and gossip. So we're immersed in that sea, and it's part of what made us human in the first place. Anthropologists and paleontologists have discovered that there's actually a logarithmic relationship between brain size, the increase in brain size, and the increase in social group size. So in other words, the more people we were able of holding in mind when they're absent, so the more people we can readily talk about in their absence, the bigger our brain must be, right?
That makes us think about makes me think about Facebook.
That's a whole other element of how the internet is changing gossip, so that it really does become global, and it's no longer, it gets degraded because people are less responsible for the things that they say about whoever. There's a sense of detachment because you're not face to face with people.
So the more Facebook friends we have, the bigger our brains are? Am I understanding that right?
There's that well-known
name them all
200-person limit.
Right.
I think it's about 200.
I think it's
Yeah.
150.
I
150.
think it's 150, yeah.
Yeah. So, brain size was bigger in Neanderthals, actually, and then it kind of, with I think Homo erectus and Homo sapiens, it actually got a little bit smaller. Didn't need to be any bigger to accomplish the tasks that we accomplish in terms of language use and sociality. So we've kind of peaked out, I think. We don't need a bigger brain, especially now that we have all these external tools to enhance our intelligence, like alphabets and computers and stuff.
I like how those two went together.
Alphabets and
And
computers.
computers.
There's arguments, that they're making us dumber because we're not, they're spell checking for us and it's
Yeah.
correcting all that shit. So,
Calculators.
Yeah,
on
yes.
some level, they're making it. It can make it more challenging to be.
Yeah. I agree. It probably is making it more challenging. But I don't think Facebook is gonna, at least as I've experienced it, is really going to allow us to increase sociality, because gossip for human beings is sort of the outcrop of the way primates will groom one another. It sort of serves the same social function. So there's an embodied element to gossip. Like, you need to actually be breathing the same air as people.
So that you
Can
don't
we
put bugs on
elaborate on
people.
You don't put bugs in people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes, yeah.
That's a one direction with grooming.
So it's about it's like social hygiene. We're trying to not like improve one another, but to help one another notice when we've accomplished something special. Providing that reflection, care. Yeah, we're taking care of one another.
See, and that to me, that is so different from gossip, and this is why we talked about, at the least, a demand for the redefinition of the term and being explicit about that redefinition. Because for me, that's so far from what I consider gossip.
Yeah, no, I know. It definitely has the negative connotation of like, let's create scandal, let's create rumor.
And we have to be honest, that's 80 to 90% minimum of what gossip is in our society.
Oh yeah.
I think that's
Totally
how
agree.
the word is interpreted. But
Yeah.
I think gossip in general just means talking about people.
But-
And so you can use it in a positive
Right.
or
This
negative
is the
way. And
difference
I don't think
between-
it's 90% used negatively. I
Yeah,
think it's
maybe-
probably much smaller percent
Okay.
that's negative.
But it hurts more, so you
Yeah,
notice it.
exactly.
Yeah, maybe it just feels up.
Yeah, I mean, this is the difference that I'm trying to draw between description of gossip and how it functions, and prescribing a better relationship with gossip. Because we're not going to escape it. If we're going to exist in community, and we're going to be able to hold one another in mind, even when we're not face to face, we're constantly going to need to construct narratives about one another. Yeah, who is this person?
Yeah.
I wanted to offer that there are certain yogic contexts where there are a number of energy lakes to practice, of which gossip is viewed as a really important one. But you could almost highlight a qualitative difference between the rumor and hearsay that is the stuff of myth and legend on the one hand versus that which is pernicious, maybe is linked with money or the paparazzi or with ill will. And I have a meditation teacher who will sort of buffer his accounts of other people that might be sort of dubious by saying, God bless her. Like, she says, oh, I'll meditate when I feel like it. But you have to meditate like every day, not just when you're moved to it.
Yeah.
He's got this buffering thing that he does.
And he also probably doesn't use their names.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That's careful.
And what's the status of truth in the gossip? How do you feel about the importance of that? Because it sounds like it's somewhat irrelevant in the need for social building or grooming. You can embellish someone, you can,
Right.
make them better, you can influence how people will take them. How does, how do these claims depend on actual fact?
Well, in human society, truth is, I would definitely take a sort of pragmatist definition of truth.
Right.
The truth is what works.
Uh-huh.
So if I tell a story and people like the story and they keep telling it,
Yeah.
that story becomes true
Right.
in the social context. One of the things I wanted to sort of bring up in terms of situating gossip cosmologically is that we're so obsessed with one another, with human beings, with other people, and we've sort of backgrounded all these other creatures that we exist in. And, you know, to move out of this sort of industrial, anthropocentric perspective, I think we need to explore wider notions of gossip that include all these other creatures. They don't speak the language that we speak, but they have language. You know, bacteria gossip with genes that they share through their membranes, and trees gossip with you know, these phytochemicals that they put into the soil, and they're constantly exchanging messages with one another. So not only in the human social setting is truth a sort of, it's a construct, which doesn't mean it's not real, it has real effects. But even biologically, truth is, you know, this, what becomes true is the genetic stories, the genetic codes, you could say, that catch on and that spread, you know, throughout the environment in the most effective way. And, you know, we usually think of evolution as working by survival of the fittest, and it's natural. The nature is selecting which organisms are going to survive, but there's also sexual selection and the survival of the sexiest, which is based on desire and like. So in some sense, you know, thinking about the nature of time here, the future is the set of possibilities that we yearn for, that we desire to bring about. And biologically speaking, desire plays a constructive role in what sort of organisms will come forth in the preceding subsequent generations. So like, female peacocks really thought that plumage was beautiful, so males progressively got longer and longer plumage because that's what the female desired.
Right.
So there's this element of like, biologically speaking at least, I won't go any deeper than that in terms of like physics and elements and molecules, but at least biologically there's this element of desire that brings forth new forms of physical body, of physical embodiment. So truth in that sense of like correct representation of reality is no longer relevant in that context. Truth becomes way more a matter of what works or what is desirable.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. I was gonna just add one thing to the notion of bringing more of our world.
Mm-hmm.
If you read like Native American stories, you know, the characters of the stories are coyote or
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
various creatures, and it's interesting, you know, is that somewhat of a gossip, even though it's anthropomorphizing these animals. You know, it's sort of a gossip of
Totally. Yeah.
bringing their world around them.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. Is watching, you know, astrology is in some sense telling the story of the stars, bringing their movements and behaviors into our lives by celebrating the things that they do, above us, and you know, telling the stories of animals as we observe them in the natural world is bringing them into the circle of gossip that structures human society, but it's widening human society so that it starts to include, as it did for indigenous peoples and you know, all pre-modern peoples really. It brought all these other creatures into the conversation.
And like you're saying, it helps define possibility, because if the story about the forest is these trees are really good lumber for our houses, then that creates the possibility for the trees. And if the narrative is these trees are homes for this woodpecker, it's just so beautiful. Now it's, you know, it changes the possibilities for the tree. That's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't thought about that
Yeah.
in that way.
Yeah. So I think that about covers the descriptive wing, and then I move into. Go ahead.
I want to tell a quick story about that ties into like what you were just describing about like sexual selection and just like
Yeah.
I had a experience when I was really high on LSD
Mm-hmm.
and ketamine once.
Oh,
I turned and I stood and looked into the mirror,
Yeah.
and my face was like primeval man, you know.
Yeah.
And then it just like continued to morph and change into all these new human faces, you know, into become like people that it seemed like I knew, until finally I recognized myself. But when I was done with the experience, I had this feeling, this intuition that we literally are constructing the way that we look through the way that we desire each other to look, and in our loves, in our beloveds, like through the evolution of humanity. It's like as we see each other, our offspring are literally becoming what we are desiring.
Through
to
what
look
we're
like.
attracted to.
Yeah, to what we're attracted to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the intuition that experience left me
That's
with.
exactly what I'm trying to get at. Yeah, thanks for that.
So you're welcome. Thank you for reminding me about it.
Yeah. So, clearly we create each other. My personality, even my body, doesn't belong to me. It belongs to, or it's a product of these decisions and these desires that I've inherited from many past generations. And that's sort of given as a gift to me. And in this present life, we all share these gifts with one another. And it's only in that context of sharing and co-creative discovery that I start to find myself and start to understand who I might be. And this gets to this phrase I mentioned at the beginning called soul making. Is anyone familiar with that? I don't know if a few of you are. It comes out of James Hillman's work, but he's drawing it out of John Keats, who in a letter to I think his younger brothers talked about how life is a veil of soul making, and that we don't come into the world with a sort of preformed, unchanging soul, but the soul is rather a process of growth and development that unfolds over the course of a lifetime, and that sometimes this process can be deformed, sometimes irrevocably, but in the proper communal container, the soul can be born in such a way that it actualizes its potential. And this isn't like there's one fixed potential that we hope to actualize. There are many potentials. Like if you look off into the future, which is the realm of potential, it's not just a cone, it's more like a fractal, right? So there are all these branches, right? And they're alive, they're growing and shifting and connecting and disconnecting from one another, depending on the decisions that we make in the present and the way that we are open to the present, the way that we interpret the past. That's constant. The past doesn't change, right? It's objectively immortal, is the way Whitehead would talk about it. It died into actuality, but certainly we can reinterpret the past. We can inherit it differently as we move into the future. But the future is wide open. It's constantly, growing together in these novel patterns. Rick uses the description or the analogy of a GPS map where it gave you a route and then you turned left when you shouldn't have, so it recalculates the route. That's kind of like what the future is like. Possibilities. So we make soul. Yeah, recalculating. As I was discussing before, we make soul by gossiping with one another about both what's happened in the past, but about how we can step more fully into the future based on our potentials, which I can't realize on my own. I need other people's reflections to help me have enough confidence even to attempt to step into my potentials. So this is not an easy thing for most people, I think, in American culture, especially with all the emphasis on the individual and freedom and rights rather than responsibilities and the community and so on. That this recognition of the soul not being an unchanging substance, like as if we think about the soul as if like I have a soul, so we immediately privilege the ego over the soul. Like I'm in charge here, I'm in control, I know who I am, don't tell me who I am, I know who I am. If we're honest with ourselves, it's not usually the case. There's this philosopher, mystic, Douglas Harding, who talks about being faceless. We don't see our face. Our face, in fact, isn't even for us. It's for others. And there's a big hole where my face should be that opens to the world. Right? So an infant learns how to use their face and make expressions and stuff by looking at their mother and the other adults in their environment. They learn how to use their own face, move these muscles and stuff vicariously by looking at others. Right? And they start to feel, internally and gain a sense of control over their emotional state to some level, to some degree, based on the movements of their face. If you notice, like if you just smile when you're sad, just make the motion, smile. Actually, it releases, the neurochemicals and gets the brain working in such a way that it would be if you were happy. And it's not like a quick fix to any major depression, but it can help. Just smile more. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that is so true. I don't want to interrupt.
Almost done, and then I encourage interruption. In terms of how to prescribe a more conscious relationship to gossip so that it becomes, the title of this was The Gossip Doc. So how do we share news with one another that's good?
Why, you heard some good news?
Matt thinks all news is good news.
Yeah.
Because I like to spin it.
Because it's new.
Everything can lie.
I have somehow inherited the nickname Gossip Face.
Someone found your face for you.
Giant hole that is just
And
I called you Gossip Face, and Adam Robert didn't stop laughing.
because he was one of the few that knew about my theory of gossip before. But I don't always succeed, but I really try. When I hear news, maybe it's not even necessarily good news, I try to spin it so that it's positive. And when I talk about people, I talk about them in a way that's loving and inviting of them, so that when those who I'm talking to about this absent person and encounter that person again, that they will have an increased sensitivity to who that person is. Right?
Yeah. I don't interrupt either. Go ahead. Sorry.
You already did, just go ahead.
Well, the thing that you were saying earlier when you were describing the light cone initially, how it's always, the present moment's always affecting the future in the way that, I don't know, the possibilities are always changing based on gossip. So, if I'm talking to Robert McDermott and I say, Josh Morrow is he's such a good guy. He brings such an important part of the community and what he brings. The next time that Robert runs into Josh, there's just going to be something else present.
Right.
Robert's going to file that way. Or I can be like, Josh is kind of asshole. He spends all of his time on his bike.
Who the fuck would do that?
Anyway, I just think it's really important. Like, we're helping build up people's realities in other people's minds and realities in a way that can be really transformative for them.
Yeah.
And like you're saying too, it's like, well, maybe now Robert wants to invite Josh into a project that he's working on because he's sort of been vetted and talked about in a positive way by maybe multiple people.
Right.
And the inverse is also true.
Yeah. And what's crucial, I've been tripping out on this for a while, is that it's not just that you talked to Robert and then it took Robert actually physically encountering Josh and then talking to him based on the impression that you gave Robert about Josh. It's more instantaneously when you are talking to Robert about Josh, Josh's future is changing.
Yeah. Okay.
The potentials are some are breaking apart, new ones are connecting. So this is a process of co-creation that's happening in not simply a physical way, like the physics as we understand it. Quantum physics is different, but in terms of what's the physical world that we think of as the most actual is the past. It's what's happened already. The future isn't physical. You could say it's conceptual. It's about abstract possibilities. And those change outside of space and time, right? They're sort of non-locally present with us. So when we're talking about those who are absent, we're affecting them right then and there. We're affecting what's possible for them right then and there. And they may not necessarily feel it. I think it's possible that they may feel it. You can hear, your ears burn when people are talking about you. It's just, we all know that feeling, I think.
Can I add a distinction that I feel like is important to move in this direction is, so if commonly we could talk about people without this awareness about the possibility of influencing the field that person walks into, how people perceive them, is created for them. So if we were to start being more conscious of that, it's not necessarily that we know the best form for that person to enter into, and so we're going, it's what you're pointing to, I feel like, is it's not that, it's a care, like it's a simple
affirmation.
Yeah, it's like we're really good at putting each other down.
Right.
So maybe we could practice. With the awareness of wow, it. It really does affect the person and all of us.
So, just I was saying before that I don't belong to myself and I don't know who I am unless people reflect me to myself. That's not to say that I want to downplay the importance of individuality and autonomy. So when we're caring for others, we're not pulling them by the arms forward to their potential because we don't know what ultimately they're going to actualize. It's more like a pat on the butt. The individual has the momentum themselves.
Get in there, put you in the game. Bro slap.
Bro slap.
So I'm not trying to leave you there. I don't know where you're going.
And it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
What's different for me, it's so beautiful to envision that because of the care that it invokes and the community. That is community building.
It's all about us, I think.
All that, definitely.
And it's also about calling people to their highest self. So if you want to be putting somebody down for something, you're actually I'd really, like to call them into a new way of being, and how can I recognize the ways that they already do that and speak to that to give that more juice.
And it deepens our wisdom because you could look at someone and maybe it's the easy, quick thing to do to judge and throw away. But if you have to actually sit with somebody's story, holding the light and shadow in a balanced way, all of that stuff, it's not just for them. You deepen as a person. There's something about the care of the other that deepens you as a person in a more beautiful way.
So it's ultimately a form of self-care too. Gossiping consciously is not only caring for the community, it's caring for yourself.
That's something that when you were talking opened up a lot for me, and I was trying to think about what happens when I go home and like my partner receives a lot of the gossip, and I was of like my experience of, let's say, yesterday or something. I go home and I'm like, why does that happen? And it's a way for me to locate myself again, and by processing and metabolizing all of the data input that I'm receiving on the different dimensions that happen when I interact with people, and how much the story of creating the other, but also myself as well, and how important that is for me to try and find my face. And thank you so much for bringing that image, because when we did the opening circle, I was like, sometimes I just feel like I don't, like there's just this river moving through me, and I don't have a face, like you know, I can't locate it, and it makes so much sense now. I'm like, but yeah, that makes sense.
Jess, I think that face thing is profound too, because like sometimes, like if I don't know how to put this. I've been noticing my face more lately, and it's kind of annoying. Like thinking about what my face is doing, which I never really used to think about what my face was doing, and I don't know why I've been thinking about what my face is doing lately, but I've been thinking about it, and it's kind of annoying.
I'm born in 1973 too.
Yeah.
And I feel the same way. We're getting old, man.
Is that
73.
And we're starting to
me
look
too,
like our
I've been feeling
fathers.
it.
and
Oh,
it's
wait, we
like-
got another 73 right here, just said the
Yeah,
same thing.
Face
Face
consciousness.
thing,
So
yeah.
it's wrinkling.
But it's not, yeah, it's different.
It's, I mean, I never thought about it in terms of age, but just like in terms of like what my face is.
Well, it is also fascinating to me, like with Skype and FaceTime, when you
Yeah.
can see your own face when you're talking to somebody.
Yeah, totally.
It's not natural.
It's,
So
it's like I'm talking to Ariel on Skype sometimes, and I'm like kind of looking at my face, going, well, I don't want my face to do that. I don't want my face to do that.
I want my face.
You end up
to
watching
just-
your own face more.
Yeah, more than you. It's a really, but that's a really neat image to think of this as a whole that the soul is coming out of.
See, that's what I think.
Soul.
This draws out more of my apprehension about Facebook and the internet in terms of what it's going to do to gossip. Because most people are on Facebook, they're not so much concerned with connecting with their friends; they're concerned with how their friends view them.
Yeah.
So it's more about constructing yourself than it is about actually sharing space with others.
Yeah.
You know?
We like post certain pictures of ourselves and delete other ones that other people post.
Well, I've never deleted a picture.
It's a
Yeah. The way I mean, I use Facebook a lot. It's great for social networking and stuff, but I have my own policy is I'm not going to delete a picture. The picture was taken of me, that's who I am.
Right.
There I was doing what I do. So why can't it be on the
I
internet?
had that policy and I regret it.
Well, it holds me accountable. It's like, oh, there are cameras around.
Right.
Am I gonna do this? Or
Right.
whatever it might be.
Question actually, because I do think about that, and I don't want to gossip, and I really try to be careful about that. But there are certain situations as well when there's a lot of covert stuff going on within a group, and so people are treating you a certain way, and you're picking up on that, and you try to talk to that person, and you're shut out, and then you're stuck with yourself, and you're stuck with all these emotions, and then you go to speak to someone about that person, and you don't even say who that person is, and that person already knows who you're talking about. And that's happened to me a lot, where I don't even say the name, but it's like my way of knowing that I'm not crazy, and I just go to the person and I say, this is happening to me, and I don't want to say who. And almost every time it's like, boom, I get that person's name back. But then it's like, we don't want to talk bad about that person. We don't want to spread gossip, but it's more
You need to process.
You need to process, and you need to, and I also want to just bring that into the room, because sometimes when you're talking about someone, it's really just a way to figure out how to handle the situation instead of, shape how that person sees that person, because they've already see them the same way as well, or maybe they have a deeper insight.
And a big lesson I had to learn around the same thing with friends of mine, because like I always tend to be the one who's like devil's advocate, and they're like, oh, so and so, blah blah blah, and I'm like, but what about, think about what's going on in their life, and like, and people hate that, like, it's
annoying.
Exactly, yeah. And so I had to learn. I'm like, nobody wants to hear that. They just want you to empathize with what they're
That's
feeling.
complicated.
Most of the time.
You know?
Yeah.
But it was a lesson for me because I'm like always thinking
Right.
like everybody, but they're like, no, stand up for me. You're standing up for my antithesis or whatever.
But I'm sure that's helpful, even if they are like defensive. Like I know,
But I needed to just recognize their emotion first and
Yeah.
validate them
Yeah.
first,
Well,
and then I could come in with another perspective, and
that's
then
true.
they
And
could
some
hear
people
it.
need that. I mean,
Yeah.
like a lot of people. Yeah. But I just think about during this whole time, I was gonna wait for him to finish, but nobody else is, so I'm gonna talk. I have like a best friend that I talk about all the time, and I go home and I talk about all of you guys. He knows you so well, and it's like, there are a lot that I need to process because there's a lot of I feel negative energy as well, and so it's so it's not always but I tell him these things, and then eventually he will like show me, we work out that there are these intricate backgrounds about people that we don't know, and so but like we do talk, like, but we are processing,
Right.
and so and I feel like we've gotten to the point where we're getting a little bit older and we can see those things and be like more empathetic, but that has taken a long time. We started just being like bitchy gossipers and like the negative sense, and mostly for fun, because it makes us laugh, but but now it's like, no, we're really trying to understand, and I will do the same and reflect that back to him, but we have that like validation of yes, I feel that energy too, and what is that, so I think it's important to not, we don't go around just being like, this person's amazing, I love everyone, look at their potential. We don't,
That's not really. That's not realistic.
It's like holding a reverence, even if you're processing. It's like holding the I thou, even if you're processing and confused and hurt.
Yeah, like I had.
You keep the I thou, and then it falls more into this vision that you have.
Right. Yeah, and we're always needing to gossip as a way of metabolizing. I think Jesse used that word. We're digesting what has happened to us, and I'm not saying that we always have to have a smile on our face whenever we're talking about someone who's not around.
Yeah, no.
Because that's not realistic. It's not possible.
It's not authentic.
And it's not authentic. And what I'm really trying to say is that gossip should not always. We shouldn't necessarily always approach gossip as something that makes us feel guilty, like we're doing something wrong.
Well,
Lots of times we could gossip more compassionately, but that's a learning process. As we age and as we discover new things about ourselves and our own vulnerabilities and the reasons that make us act in a way we regret that other people probably gossip about, we start to understand how these things happen. And we're always, we're embedded in a reality full of like celebrity scandal and political scandal, and like gossip gets a really bad name for a good reason, because it's really disruptive of like effective human relationships, and it's destroying our society and our civilization because we can't find a way to talk about one another in a mutually uplifting way. Everyone's pushing their shit on everybody else, instead of processing it and metabolizing it in a more effective way.
Democrat versus Republican, it's like it's a fight. So,
So speaking to that now.
Okay, be quick.
Sorry,
I'll
I'll let you. No,
My hand is
I
She's following protocol.
That's fine.
But you've also talked several times and he hasn't.
Okay, Lydia's next. Go ahead.
No, Lydia can go. Let me put this succinctly.
Okay, think about how you're gonna say it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It reminds me of Shannon's presentation on the negativity bias too, and how it's not that we want to whitewash our experience with positivity, because there's a reason why we notice that which hurts us or scares us or makes us angry or that we want to protect ourselves from, but that in this we seem to not be as well practiced in noticing and taking in the creative, the life-affirming, the meaningful, all of that, and so it's like a practice that you're pointing us towards, and like a blind spot. I feel like I'm getting some clarity on a blind spot that I might have. And that's all.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, it's I'm just trying to bring consciousness to something that maybe we background and feel guilty about when we do, despite the fact that it's not going away. We're not going to stop gossiping. It's like the condition for the possibility of community.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to find a way of engaging it with more presence.
So
Okay.
I want to.
Well, let's let Hunter go, and then you can go.
Hey, Matt, yeah, we're just gonna say we gotta wrap up too.
Don't worry about it. I can.
Are we over time
No,
already?
Hunter, come on.
We're over time.
Yeah, so like let's do 5 more minutes.
Okay.
Okay, so two things. As somebody who's been so deeply wounded by gossip and community that I am deeply triggered throughout this entire conversation you and I are having. I actually don't integrate into communities in my life because what gossip has done to me over my life since middle school till today. And also coming from the school of thought since middle school that I will not talk about somebody in the third person without their presence unless the other person knows them deeply and well. I will not. Holding the mutual sovereignty of the other person to portray themselves as they actually are is so important to me that I think the worst harm you can actually do to another person is do exactly what you're saying. Create the image of them without their physical presence to justify it. I sincerely believe that that's one of the greatest harms you can do to a person. And so it's really hard for me. It's extremely difficult for me to hear this. And what I would ask you, Matt, is how do you hold the sovereignty and the individuality of the person? And I love what you're trying to do. I need you to know that. This positive gospel of gossip, I love the idea, but I can't see it. I can't. And as somebody who has pretty much checked out from community completely, because I don't give a shit what people think about me anymore. That's what I've come to. It's like, if you're gonna gossip about me, I don't need you in my life anyways. If you're gonna think these things about me without checking in with yourself and who I actually am as a person and coming to me, you can fuck off for all I care, really. And I've come to that really deeply, at first out of defensiveness, but secondarily out of a radical freedom and personal liberation. And so, coming from that place, how do you hold personal sovereignty? How can we honor the sovereignty of the individual as a free creative entity while maintaining the fact that when you do talk about them, you're creating them? So what's that tension?
Well, first, I totally respect, your position and the standard that you're holding yourself to in terms of that you're trying to hold yourself to in terms of not talking about those.
We're just holding the sovereignty of the individual to be as they are, not as I would presumably project them to be.
Right. Well, that's
As
the
much as
importance of
possible.
ass slapping and not, being. You're not trying to lead someone to where you think they should be.
And I think
you're trying to encourage them to be who they are.
And I get this feeling of like I can see aspects of Matt from my own lens and hold the tension of your individual, and this is be part of what I'm talking about, hold your individuality in love along with the projection. But there needs to be that divisive split. This is what I project or believe onto Hunter because of my experience. Or Matt. Sorry, I'll use a third person. But that's not Matt.
Yeah.
Matt is a constantly creative, changing entity that's beautiful in that ability.
Yeah.
Right? He is not, the gossip face.
Yeah.
That's one mask that I can put on the Matt when I feel uncomfortable about how he refers to gossip.
But he is
Then I can put this face on. But I realize that's just a mask I put on.
We're never that separated.
Well, this is a hall of mirrors. Like, each of our faces is a mirror. And where is the true self? I mean, I'm not sure.
I believe it's an innate freedom, and that's the important part. Is
Right.
holding the sovereignty and the freedom.
I could be wrong.
2 minutes, ladies and gents.
I could be wrong. I'm just coming from the perspective of gossip's not going away.
And the importance of.
So how do we engage it in a way that's more, or that's less hurtful and more enhancing of relationship for community? So, but I hear you.
I think that reveals a real interesting twist to it also, is you're talking about responsibility of how we talk about others, but what about the responsibility of listening to others? We have a responsibility to acknowledge that this is a subjective, we can contextualize what they're saying, we can empathize with the person they're talking about. So really, like, a lot of the responsibility of like how we take someone is our own responsibility.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you for the
when I was
inside.
He really brings that out.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, listening.
I like that there's kind of a synthesis of your perspective, your reception of the person, and then you talking about them maybe to a third party because, as Melody said, you need to process what happened. Did you see that too? Like, how do I then approach this person? That there's almost like a jockeying process that needs to happen before you take that, almost third step of going into approaching like the gossip about party directly and being like, let's talk,
Yeah.
and it's so being direct in that way instead of talking about somebody talking to them.
Yeah, cool. So we're an hour and 5 minutes in, so I'm pretty much
108.
right on time.
3 more.
All right.
I'll let you know Matt Habibi was listening attentively to this the whole time. It's been really cool to watch him tune in.
Cool.
Nice.
Can we gossip about the great turning?
We're gonna storytell.
Yeah. How much time do we have?
I